Hello, this is Stargore. This video is a Twitch stream that was not edited, so it's gonna look like a Twitch stream. Welcome to my vision of World of Warcraft Classic Plus. The design direction of WoW Classic Plus, of my vision of WoW Classic Plus, is substantially different from that of retail WoW circa Shadowlands, and the private servers, Vanilla Plus and Turtle WoW. It's also different from those. This is partially because it aims to fix Vanilla WoW's many problems first, flesh out and polish it second, and add new content third. Scrolling. Where the fuck was I now? This was part of a playlist of videos. Check this video's description for a link to the playlist. The document displayed is my vision of World of Warcraft Classic Plus, and the document's version number is version 1.5.15. All versions of the document are based upon patch 1.12.2 of World of Warcraft. That is, the one right before the Burning Crusade pre-patch. If you just want to know about the general design direction of my vision of World of Warcraft Classic Plus before you otherwise look into this, then watch the introductory video in this playlist, or read the document yourself and look at the list of major features. A link to the document is in my channel's About page. That, and I do not have a team of people working with me to make an actual private server out of this. This is all pure design thus far, and it ain't done yet. I need some water. Okay. Before I go into the actual changes that I want to make to the dungeons and raids, it is worth talking about the concept of difficulty. Real difficulty that is not artificial is the kind of difficulty that stays difficult after you and everyone else involved knows what they're supposed to do, and in the case of role-playing games, have full best and slot forever gear and full buffs and consumables with an optimal party of raid that's all at the level cap, if applicable. That's all at the level cap. Save video scripts.txt. To impose real difficulty upon a player, you'll generally have to test one of three things. The first way is by testing the player's reaction time. This, of course, means testing your ability to do something very quickly after the game gives you some sort of indicator to do it, such as the delivering bomb debuff to Pure 90 during the Baron Gadon fight. However, lag exists, and green ping is not, well, instantaneous or what have you, so, yeah. You can only test that so well. You can only go so hard on testing reaction time, unfortunately, because online games. The second way is by testing the player's precision of input. An example of testing the player's precision of input is telling the player that you're about to have a very short window of things to push a button during a few or several seconds later, and then expecting the player to push the button within that tiny window, which may be a few frames in duration. A more obvious example would be a platforming segment, wherein you have... Why is that a comma? Why is that a period? That's supposed to be a comma. Wherein you have to jump from tiny platform to tiny platform without falling off. Yeah, platforming segment with tiny platforms. And the third way is something that you're already very familiar with as WoW players. Testing the player's situational awareness. This, of course, means testing your ability to keep track of stuff so they don't get killed by it, which is generally these days, if it's complicated enough, going to be accomplished by a 41st raid member. Or in the case of retail, 21st raid member. You can also throw in a bit of RNG to make the elements of memorization be harder to apply to the player's success. But don't use too much RNG, lest the game becomes legitimately unfair in one or more manners that are not intentional. Now, because this is a game where a lot of players have to stand still for substantial consecutively long spans of time, in order to use most of their important abilities, such as Frostbolt or fucking Healing Wave, never mind the fact that online games have ping, there are many, many ways in which you cannot afford to test the player's reaction time without the game, which would be easy. To test the player's reaction time without the game being unfair, which should be easy enough to imagine that I won't have to provide any examples of that. However, with some creativity, you can still test the player's reaction time despite that and the existence of ping, provided that ping can safely be expected to be around 100 milliseconds or lower, which is also known as green ping. Technology is good enough these days that they can expect nearly all players to have green ping if their connections to a server in their region, and it's only going to get better unless mankind goes extinct in the near future, which it probably will, but I digress. Anyway, most MMORPGs these days, as far as I know, make heavy use of Simon Says and such sort of disco floor mechanics in order to impose difficulty upon their players in their raid encounters, etc. and whatnot. Those are tests of situational awareness, and in the case of Simon Says, it also requires some foreknowledge of the raid's mechanics. Otherwise, it's gonna put text in your face like you just like big text in the middle of the screen that says dodge a lava waste or something like that. Ugh, that's awful. But for reasons I don't feel like going into right now. Anyway, set of MMORPGs also make light usage of the concept of testing the player's reaction time, but as far as I know, they don't test your precision of input much. However, when I eventually get around to revamping the mechanics of every raid boss and most raid mobs, they are going to test precision of input, reaction time, and situational awareness somewhat evenly, except there might not be as many tests of reaction time as I'd like for there to be for reasons that I have already explained. Now, onto the changes made to dungeons and raids in general. There's a lot more to go over than just the concept of difficulty. Do this. NPCs in general will receive sweeping changes, including changes that make most elite mobs be harder to kill. See section number 4.0.3, Sweeping NPC Changes, for more information. I'll be covering that in a later video. Zolgrub, AK-20, and world bosses that were not 40-man raids will be turned into 40-man raids. How did I forget that part? World bosses are going to be 20-mans. Yeah, Zilgrub and AK-20 will be turned into 40-man raids. And all instance 40-man raids, including Zolgrub and AK-20, which will have 7-day resets, will be retuned to be of such a high difficulty that it will not realistically be possible for the top guilds to clear the raid without having more than 37 players who are not laggy and know what they are doing and are in full pre-raid best in slot gear, epics not included, while being fully buffed and stacking consumables, including flasks, but not including non-portable world buffs, which are massively nerfed. See section number 4.0.10 for more details. World buffs, on the other hand, are going to be tuned to be 20-man raids. If I recall correctly, they already kind of were. Well, anyway, yeah, world buffs are going to be 20-man raids because PvP is a thing. The classic not plus raid frames will be used with the exception that you can reorganize the group frames in ways that you could not before so that you, for example, can drag the groups around like you could with the old raid frames. When I say classic not plus raid frames, I mean before Burning Crusade Classic. That's a classic I played before Burning Crusade Classic. You cannot change your raid composition, including who is in which group in the raid, while anybody in the raid is in combat. You cannot zone into a non-battleground instance that contains a raid group if you're in the group while anyone inside is in combat. And removing a person from a raid group during combat will cause the game to remember which group in the raid group the composition that person was in until everyone in the raid group exits combat. So that if you invite the person back, the person is automatically put back into that group, and so you can't use kicking a guy and then inviting him back as a limited workaround, so not being able to move people around in the raid competition during combat. This means, among other things, that you will not constantly be swapping shamans around in your raid group composition in order to get more usage out of their totems than you're intended to be able to get. Similarly for Paladin Wars. Good old water. To make instance farming be less profitable, the maximum number of instance resets per hour will be reduced from 5 to 4. A larger reduction would probably be too restrictive. When a rare mob that is in an instance, so not Bohan or Shovel Lantern or likes, when a rare spawn that is in an instance spawns, they spawn normally, but when they don't spawn, they technically spawn, except they're permanently under Game Master invisibility, with the exception that you can target them through that Game Master invisibility. That different version of Game Master invisibility. This does not mean that you'll be able to target the actual Game Master, so they'll use actual Game Master invisibility, not the de facto kind. The mob Furthermore, will never be targeted by any effects, beneficial or not, that would otherwise target him, as if it had Game Master invincibility, and it will never attack a player or player's minion or put anything else in combat, but you can still target him with a targeting command that uses its name or something similar enough to it. Obviously, the rare mob, in this case, will not have a differently colored name, like unfriendly mobs with a different shade of red in their nameplates than hostile and hated mobs. This will prevent players from reset coming instances to force rare mobs, such as Shed Rune Watcher, to spawn, which will make rare mobs stay rare. Okay, so imagine this. You zone into Upper Blackrock Spot, you get out of your Upper Blackrock Spire group and zone into it, and you get into that corner to the entrance hallway, the left corner of the entrance hallway, and you start targeting Shed Rune Watcher. You will always target Shed Rune Watcher every single time. However, there is a very high chance that Shed Rune Watcher is not actually able to be seen or killed. You can just target him. That's basically how that is, in a more simplified way. And he won't suddenly appear when you get to him either. If he's actually there, he's actually there. But if he's not actually there, it'll seem like he's actually there until you actually walk over to where he is and see that he's not actually there. By the way, Ellipses of Dream Vision were removed from the game. All Beating Stones will be removed from all dungeons. They were a bad idea anyway, and they were not turned into Summoning Stones until the Burning Crusade. Concerning raid IDs, the maximum amount of players that are allowed to be saved to any given raid ID will be no higher than 47. If 47 people are saved to a raid, then additional players who are not saved to that raid ID will automatically enter a different raid ID when they zone into the raid, making a new ID if necessary. Well, I did set that apart. Even if the raid leader is part of the first raid ID, and the additional players are in that same raid group. This change will, to a large extent, prevent guilds from cheesing raids by drastically altering the raid compositions for certain boss fights, and guilds will still be able to change people out for a raid in case someone can't make it for some reason because like he has a doctor's appointment or some shit like that. Or his mom suddenly died or something. To help flesh out the game, pre-laid traps will be added to some places in Azeroth where there's hunter NPCs, with pets or not, of a high enough level, whether they be in the open world, in dungeons, or in raids. They'll be mostly tripping these NPC traps will be mostly inconsequential in the open world. They'll be somewhat consequential in dungeons, but not enough that every group will want to have a rogue in it. It will be consequential period in 10-man raids. It will be very consequential in Blackrock Spire, and it will be lethal in 40-man raids. Beyond that, I have not defined such traps at all. Except the year stuff that's in here. Said traps, in instances or not, will only respawn when their associated enemy respawns. As an exception, however, no traps will be put near raid bosses. Furthermore, all non-player character traps will randomly be placed within a 30-yard radius of their spawn point or patrol of their associated NPCs, spawn point, or patrol route, changing every time he respawns. On a related note, Rexar will not use traps. He's not that kind of hunter. One of the few quality of life changes in this saga, and actually several. To save some guilds a lot of grief, when you attempt to enter a raid that someone else is saved to without being saved to that raid instance yourself, you, before being allowed to go through the instance portal or be teleported into your raid, will get a 15-second pop-up window mentioning that one or more raid bosses in the raid ID that you are attempting to enter are dead, and asking if you want to be saved at that raid. If you click yes, you enter the raid and are saved to it, but if you click no or the timer runs out, or you get more than 5 yards away from the entrance, then you do not enter the raid or get saved to it. In this case, those are the Swift Walker counts as the entrance, as does the Blackwing Glare Orb. I'm very aware that this change is already in Classic, not Plus, but it's not Vanilla WoW. This document is based on Vanilla WoW. What the hell is this thing on my keyboard? It's an antique brush. In order to cause statement and amplify magic to not trivialize certain raid bosses, I will change said raid bosses accordingly for damage magic by making small damage values, but not big ones, hit harder, but not as much harder as damage magic reduces the incoming damage by, and for amplify magic by implementing a small mana burn mechanic, a different small mana burn mechanic for each relevant raid boss. I have not gotten around to this yet. Do know, however, that amplify and dampen magic were also changed to have I'll just mention it later when I get around to the mage video. To the video on mages. To effectively remove a source of non-competitive income, all enemies in all dungeons and raids, as well as all enemies of the same names that are outside of dungeons and raids, so some outdoor elite enemies that are near instance entrances, such as guys in the Scarlet Monastery entrance that are also in Graveyard. Those guys are going to have 80% less loot in their pickpocketing loot tables, including their pocket change. All players will not be allowed to be saved to more than 2 40-man raids that are not in Nyx's lair at once. That is, if a player attempts to enter a 40-man raid other than a Nyx's lair that are not saved to, while being saved to 2 other 40-man raids that are not in Nyx's lair for that week, then a player will not be allowed to enter a third 40-man raid that is not in Nyx's lair until the weekly raid reset occurs. Otherwise, people are going to be doing a fuck ton of raiding per week and are going to get burnt out of the game really fucking fast. It's being done to save people from themselves. To save raiders from themselves. However, this change does not save them from just raiding on their alts instead. Speaking of which, this Vision of WoW Classic Plus is very alt-friendly. Very, very alt-friendly. And not in the way that Wrath is. The uninstanced portions of all dungeons, such as where the quest A Host of Evil takes place, will have the level ranges be raised to that of the instance portions of their respective dungeons, and the relevant quests will have their levels increased and quest rewards increased/buffed accordingly. The following bosses will have their level, but not loot, reduced by 1. They'll have their level, but not their item level or loot reduced by 1. Twilight Lord Kelris, Basil Thread, Archmage Argol, Anti-Soul, Chief Ukor Sandscalp, and Jabalandi Prophet. This will discourage people from being over-leveled to do those dungeons. The following bosses will have their level, but not the level of their loot, reduced by 2. Arcadus and Shade of Aranicus. If you are in a dungeon group, while in an instance, and then you leave the group or get kicked out of it, you, as before, will be automatically kicked out of the instance, but this will be accomplished by killing you, without durability damage, after the 1-minute timer is up, and preventing your corpse from being resurrected until you resurrect yourself by running to the instance entrance, but not inside of it, causing you to have to either do a corpse run or take great sickness to come back to life. This will prevent players from abusing ghetto herping for fast travel. Although this could, unfortunately, be used to avoid repair bills, replacing a problem with a much smaller problem. Merely entering a 40-man raid will immediately get you saved to the raid. Trash mobs will no longer respawn in 40-man raids. Obvious exceptions are included, such as flame instance and suppression room mobs, but not mobs such as lava surges or molten destroyers that had originally stopped respawning after the corresponding boss is slain. So enemies that don't actually drop loot are not going to respawn. Will still respawn. Enemies that don't drop loot will respawn. Everything else will not respawn. And if that poses an issue, then whichever enemies are going to stop dropping loot. This is to prevent people from farming trash mobs to raid epics to get more raid loot per week than is intended. And Nexus Crystals. Don't forget Nexus Crystals. Actually, hold on. Nexus Crystals. Oh, yeah, I forgot I removed Nexus Crystals from the game. I forgot. Now, where was I? So, yeah, not Nexus Crystals. I got rid of those. When the first enemies, or the guys before Razor Gore, that get killed in the Molten Core, gets killed in the Molten Core, Blackwing Glare, Zolgrub, or the Words of Encourage is slain, a 12-hour timer will begin. If this timer ends without every boss being slain, then the entire raid will be absurdly flooded with an absurd amount of trash mobs, making it basically impossible to clear the rest of the raid that week. This change and comparable changes made to the other 40-man raids will serve to prevent people from respecking back and forth for a single raid, given that respecking is a lengthy cooldown now, and it also serves to make epic items stay epic and make people not do too much raiding per character per week. But again, they can just raid on their alts. But they'll only get so many alts, just like vanilla. 40-man raids, other than Onyxia, will have 2 rare spawn bosses per raid, while AQ40 will have 4, and Nax, that is Temple of Encourage, will have 4, and Nax will have 8. Each rare spawn has a 20% chance per raid ID to spawn, and they each have loot tables 20% as large as all raid bosses have, which compensates for their being rare, meaning you'll have a reasonable chance to get everything under loot tables compared to normal bosses in a reasonable amount of time, considering whether or not the mobs even spawn in the first place. These rare spawns will all replace specific trash mobs in your raids when they spawn, and they'll be in optional locations where applicable. And you will not be required to kill... And trash mob flooding timers will not require you to kill these rare spawns. Remember to make trash mob flooding raid timers not require the players to kill rare spawn bosses. Now, where was I? Okay, here. Where is that? Ungilded people may not enter 40-man raids. Period. If you get kicked out of your guild during a 40-man raid, then you will be instantly teleported outside of the raid's entrance, even if you are already saved to the raid. However, you'll still count against the hard cap of 47 players that are allowed to be saved to the raid at a time. To the raid ID at a time. And you'll still count towards the hard cap of 47 players that may be saved to the same raid ID. People who have not been in the same guild for at least 14 days, including offline time, between raid resets or not, since they were last invited to a guild, excluding time spent being in a guild before having left it or having been kicked from it, are not allowed to enter 40-man raids either. When a 40-man raid ID is generated, it will be tied to the guild of the first person that entered the raid. All people who are not in that guild are not allowed to enter that raid ID, and of course, this will not prevent a different person in that guild from entering that raid in a different raid group to form a different raid ID. A single guild is not allowed to have more than 8 raid resets, excluding Onyxia, across all their players per week, including characters who get saved to a raid and then get kicked out of the guild and or deleted. This means that if, across all the guild's characters, even if you then delete the character. Just in case. This means that if, across all the guild's characters, they have 8 raid resets, 40-man raid resets, of course, all raid resets are 40-man, then 80 remaining people in the guild who attempt to enter a new 40-man raid ID will be unable to enter the raid until a reset is available for your guild, or 2 if you're trying to do AQ40 or Nax. Because AQ40 and Nax both require 2 raid resets to do. Because they're big raids. And Nax is a 2-week lockout instead of a 1-week lockout. This will but yeah, more on that later. This will largely prevent guilds from cycling through brand new level 60 rogues and druids to reset scum 40-man raids for rare spawns, while allowing guilds to do 2 main raid resets and 6 alt raid resets per week, and allowing guilds to exchange each reset for an extra chance at specific rare spawns via said rogue and druid alts. The above mechanics about having to be in a guild to raid cannot be changed by any guild member, including the guild master, and all those mechanics also apply to the guild master. The above mechanics will not apply on any server until said server has undergone, that is, these mechanics. These mechanics that are highlighted right now will not apply on any server until said server has undergone 4 weekly raid resets, after which point consecutive time spent having been in the same guild will be retroactively counted towards the meeting of the highlighted requirements. And all of those changes would damage a game. They prevent far more damage over time than they would inflict over time. I also might change it so that instead of being unable to enter raids, you'll be unable to obtain stuff under the raw gold from raids, but will be able to enter them. The following bosses will be changed such that pulling them will automatically pull all nearby enemies within a set area of the map. not radius of the boss. A different area for each boss, of course. Jiragashi Invoker. Rattlesnout, maybe. Glutton. Meshlock the Harvester. In his case, boss within a 60-yard radius of them. Rock Grip. Atalarion. General Angerforge. Lord Incendius. Phineas Darkfire. Pilot Ormok. Spirestone Butcher. Spirestone Magus. Spirestone Battlelord. Shadowhunter Voshkajin. Bannock Grimax. The new Lower Blackrock Spire boss, see below. Mutter Smolderwood. Crystal Fang. Overlord Wormflack, maybe. Hydraspawn. Alzin the Wildshaper. Guard Moldar. Guard Fengus. Guard Slipkick. Rattlegore. Goldbag the Incinerator. Silverhorn Harbinger. High Priest Phenoxus. High Priest Sekal. Zealot Zad. Zealot Lorcon. And possibly some bosses of the Dead Mines, AQ40, and Nax I have not properly checked out yet. As well as rare spawn 40-man raid bosses that I've yet to implement. And these bosses will, when aggroed, attempt to pull the relevant mobs once per second until they die or de-aggro. All versions of Unbouncing Strike, the raid mob ability / raid boss ability, will simply prevent blocking, dodging, and parrying, and increase the chance to receive the crushing blow by plus 30% for its duration on top of the damage that it deals. All 40-man, that is, tentatively. This is a tentative change. That was. All 40-man raid bosses will no longer know Thrash, which is basically Wind Fury weapon. The existence of those mechanics would simply mean that I would need to make those bosses hit softly enough that you can tank them without a shield, except when they Thrash. Some exceptions to this might be made, and some compensation will be given to bosses that have mechanics taken away from them in the form of new mechanics. For example, I'm pretty sure Firemaw knows Thrash, so instead of him hitting hard enough to kill a tank in 3 hits, so instead of him hitting hard enough to kill a tank without a shield in 3 hits, he's going to hit hard enough to kill a tank without a shield in 1 hit. Provided that the 3 hits are crits and that 1 hit is a crit. Of course, if you wear a shield, you're not going to get one-shotted. I'm also going to have to do something about Fire Breath not happening on the same exact instant that he melees you. Turning into a spell cast, and then the attack timer would be desynchronized or some shit. I'll figure that out later. All enrage mechanics known by 40-man raid boss and bosses that are not enrage timers will have a cast time whose duration depends upon the mob. It can be interrupted by Tranquilizing Shot, which will ignore immunity to spell interruption. Letting a raid mob or boss hit the tank while in rage will typically one-shot any fully buffed tank from full hit points without defensive cooldowns. And Best in Slot Forever gear. Yeah, letting a raid mob or boss hit the tank while in rage will typically one-shot any fully buffed tank in Best in Slot Forever gear from full hit points without defensive cooldowns, such as Shield Wall, unless the attack misses, it's dodged, or gets parried. All attackable enemies outside of what are now 40-man raids that were level 63, including skull-level enemies, will have their levels lowered to 62. So those skull-level enemies are going to be level 62 instead. This will prevent them from dropping items such as T-Boost Blazing Longsword, which technically count as 40-man raid epics due to their item level being 65. All 10 and 20-man raids except for Blackrock Depths will require level 58 to 68 enter, and all 40-man raids will require level 60 enter, and the quest level requirements will be changed accordingly, as well as the quest rewards. Some doors and chests in dungeons and raids will require lockpicking to open. See section number 4.0.8, changes related to lockpicking, under section 4 World, for more details. Oh, by the way, level 62 mobs are going to have of course, a teeny tiny chance to drop level 59 epics, which if I recall correctly is just Blade of Fana, which is almost a 40-man raid epic. Anyway, yeah, that's section number 2.0.2 of my document, General Dungeon Raid Changes. Thanks for watching, and there's going to be more videos in this playlist.